Try and drug and take advantage of an innocent girl at a party? No, not while I'm here. Welcome to Meme Reads, where we narrate the best stories and memes from various subreddits. If you enjoyed this content, please like this video and subscribe to the channel where we post content like this every Monday and Friday. Today we'll be covering the subreddit r/revenge. This next post is from Anonymous Enemy. So to put it simply, I was a terrible little kid. I used to steal from stores and my family, swear, and throw things at random people walking down the street, and I was smoking from the age of 12. Also, I didn't give a crap about anybody but my friends. They were my real family, or so I thought. And a group of all 5 of us would cause trouble every single freaking day. My parents in their later years told me that they should have been more effective in their discipline, but they really weren't to blame. I was just a mixed up kid. I used to think that doing all this stuff made me cool. I can't describe how superior I felt when I made grown adults afraid of me, but it made me feel powerful. And power was, unfortunately, something I craved when I was younger. I could go on and on about the things that I've done, but the fact is, I was just messed up in the head. I've made amends where I can and to who I could, but you're not here to listen to me beat myself up. You're here for the revenge. So long story short, when I was 16, my parents finally had enough, and despite all my tantrums and screaming and even some physical violence against my dad, they decided to put me in a school for, quote, troubled youth. I call it a school, but what it really was a military institution that taught discipline in the most brutally effective way, while throwing in some English and math classes along the way. Without going into too much detail, I'll say that this school changed me. While aggressive, violent, cocky, and near homicidal when I was first dumped on their doorstep, the men who ran this camp broke me down. I was there for just over a year. No phone calls, no visits home, no access to the outside world. For 1 whole year. I had this camp and these counselors. These real life tough men taught me just how much of a piece of crap I really was. By the end of the summer, I was a changed kid. I had fought and screamed and gotten my butt kicked more times than I can count, but eventually I was beaten down. These men taught me that real men simply don't act the way that I did, and the type of path that I was headed down would either lead me to jail or dead. They were brutally honest about it, especially this one counselor. Let's call him Jay. By the end of my quote unquote stay, I considered Jay a second father. Though I hated him at first for making me feel inferior, he really did me a favor by teaching me how toxic my behavior was. And to this day, I think of him as something as a hero. He was the main person who deemed me ready to return home. But the backstory is getting really long, so let's get to the real story. When I had returned home, I changed from an abusive little jerk to a somewhat civilized young man, ready to take on my last year of high school. I was nervous to go back since I had adapted to life at the military school, but I was also excited. I missed my friends, and I hoped that they would accept me back despite the fact that I hadn't spoken to any of them in over a year. And to my relief, I was accepted back with open arms. One of my closest friends had moved states over since I'd been away, but the other 3 were ecstatic to see me. Over the next few weeks, I settled down, and I didn't spend a lot of time with them outside of school. My parents were testing how much I had matured since returning, and were setting boundaries on when I could go out, how long I could stay out, and where I could go, things like that. I was determined to prove to them I wasn't the same screw-up that had been ruining their lives all those years ago, so I'd followed their rules. And so I only really talked to my friends during school. All of this is relevant because of what happened next. I had joined the school's football team that all 3 of my friends were a part of, and one evening after practice, all my teammates were in the gym, sweaty and dirty, but pleased with themselves. I was laughing and chatting with 3 of my best friends, so much so that I didn't notice that we were the last 3 in the gym. But that's when conversation started to turn bad. One of my friends, we'll call him friend 1 or F1 for short, started telling me about a college party they were all planning to go to, and how they'd been crashing college parties for a few months now, since it was all easy access to girls and booze. I was hesitant about it because I didn't think my mom and dad would agree to let me go, but friend 1 started talking about this girl and how he was planning on inviting her. A girl who went to the same school as us, but not one that I thought that friend 1 had any relationship with. I knew her, but I didn't really know her. He started to tell both my other friends and me that he'd been trying to get her into bed for a while and she kept making excuses. So he planned on taking her to the party and finally smashing, or so he said. When I asked him, in a joking way, what makes you so sure that she won't reject you again? He looked me dead in the eye and said as casually as you please, in the most chilling way I've ever heard in my life. I'm gonna slip something in her drink. It'll loosen her up, no problem. At first I was just kind of awkwardly laughing, thinking it was some messed up joke, but they weren't laughing with me. When I asked him if he was serious, he told me he was sick of her quote BS games, and knew that she was just stringing him along, and that the pills would just quote make things easier. I could not believe my ears. I excused myself from the conversation pretty quickly and basically bolted home, most likely driving through several stop signs, but I don't really remember. I spent the whole night trying to convince myself that my friends were just messing around. A few more days had passed and the conversation in the locker room is all but forgotten. Though they hadn't shut up about the party and they kept insisting that I just sneak out and join them, and I got called a quote wussy repeatedly for telling them that I wasn't going because of my parents, but again, I just brushed it off. Then the really hits the fan. During yet another after school training session where we all ended up last in the locker rooms, and friend one does something that I never would have expected in 1,000 years. All three of them have been talking about this party the whole time. But then friend one starts rummaging through his gym bag and he tells all of us to quote, look at this. And then he tosses friend two a small bag of little pink pills. Immediately, I feel all the blood drain from my face. And it's like bombs going off in my head and a voice telling me in my mind, holy, this is really happening. Is this serious? Holy. It's really hard to describe what I was feeling when friend one started to go into detail about how he planned on inviting this girl to a party, slipping something into her drink, and quote, making use of one of the frat boys' bedroom for a few hours. I was so sick. Literally, I could have hurled everything in my stomach on the floor as soon as I listened to all three of them talk about how, quote, awesome the party was going to be after they just described what they were going to do to this poor girl. I couldn't take it, and again, I ran off. I did end up actually puking later that night, going over and over in my head what the heck I just witnessed. I couldn't believe it. These three boys have been my friends for the last 15 years. I thought of them as my own family, thought I knew them better than anybody. But 1 year away, and then this? I'll tell you that I actually broke down crying that night. I'm not ashamed to admit it. What I am ashamed of is how long it actually took to get a grip and handle it. I knew I should have told somebody, but in some messed up way, my loyalties were still screwed. Don't beat me up for it. I know what I should have done, but I was 17. These were my best friends. I didn't want them to get in trouble, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't let this go down. So instead of reporting all this to an adult like a normal person, I decided to sort it out on my own. So I went to friend one and I told him not to do what he'd planned. I told him it was stupid and dangerous, and it would ruin both his life and the life of the girl he was planning on doing it to. He didn't even blink. He got right in my face and told me that the school that I had sent to had turned me soft, that he hated how much I had changed, and that he'd been trying to change me back with friend 2 and friend 3. He even told me that they'd been talking about me behind my back, and how they planned to quote, give me a turn on the girl once friend 1 was done with her, just to show me what I was missing out on. Then he said something I'll never forget. He told me word for word, I'm doing that little a favor. She's pure. And after this party, your mom won't be the only one finally getting some. I punched him. We fought and we both got sent home on suspension for fighting. I could not believe it. I was seething. My best friend had said that to me. My best friend told me what he was gonna do to an innocent girl at a party, and I was a wussy for not wanting to join in. I was disgusted. I was sickened to my core, and I was done with him. My parents were disappointed that I'd gotten suspended so shortly after coming home, but I just sat quietly while my mom cried and my dad screamed at me. I know now that I should have told them what had happened, but after what friend 1 had said to me, I had this insane notion in my head that I was going to get back at him all on my own. And now to the revenge. After the weekend of being grounded, I was sent back to school, and the first thing I did was seek out friend 1. He was about as bashed up as I was, but he was sporting a nice black eye from where I'd hit him in the face. Friend 2 and friend 3 were standing with him, and they glared at me as I approached them. Then I did something that made me feel sick. I apologized to him. I told him I was sorry that I hit him, and that he was right, and I had changed, and I hated what that school had done to me. And I just wanted things to go back the way they were, and I was the old me again. And surprisingly, they all bought it. Friend 1 and I even hugged it out. I put a cherry on top when I told them I'd be coming to the party. Now for my dumb teenage plan. First, I started recording them whenever we were all alone together. I wanted to get everything that they had said about the party and the girl that they were planning on victimizing on tape. I knew I needed some kind of proof or it'd just be my word against theirs. And after a few days, I got more than enough, but I wasn't done there. No, my stupid self had had a plan and I was gonna fulfill it to the fullest. So the next thing I did was track down the girl, take her aside, and tell her everything. She was pissed and scared, but I begged her not to go to the police or tell anybody. I know how stupid that was, but for some reason she did listen to me. I had a plan. It was crazy and stupid, but it was a plan to teach them all a lesson. So I told her to tell friend 1 that she was going to meet him at the party, but just to stay home so that she could stay safe. Later that day, friend 1 started bragging about how the girl had accepted his invitation and how everything was going to plan. And I sat there, phone half out of my pocket, recording the whole dang thing. So the night of the party finally rolls around, and I sneak out because, you know, I was grounded. I think it's worth mentioning that I wasn't filled with vindication or self-righteousness throughout the whole night. I was second guessing myself, I had doubts, but in some strange way, I felt betrayed. These 3 boys had been my brothers since before I could throw a punch, and I felt betrayed that they had gone down this road. What messed me up in the head even more was the possibility that I might have been like them if my parents hadn't sent me away. It was a strange moment of realization to come into the middle of a crowded frat house surrounded by drunk idiots, but you take what life throws at you. So the night goes on, and friend 1 is getting steadily more frustrated that the girl he invited hadn't shown up. I made sure to keep him in my sights for the whole night, not wanting him to decide that any old girl would do if he couldn't take the one he wanted. I kept an eye on all of them, watching as they drank and drank while I stayed as level-headed as possible with some water and a beer can. When midnight finally came, all 3 of them were plastered, and I knew all the girls in the party would be safe by then. By this time, the crowd was dying down, and a few people who couldn't hold their liquor were already passed out around the house. While all 3 of them were occupied with a drinking game, I hunted down friend's 1 bag and found the bag of little pink pills. Here's where I did something that I'm not particularly proud of, but I'll tell you anyway. I slipped 1 pill into 3 beers each and handed them to my quote friends, and then waited. It didn't take long before all 3 of them were passed out on the floor, along with quite a few of the other party guests. I then took out a black permanent marker from my bag and wrote the word on all 3 of their foreheads. And then I took pictures and immediately uploaded them to our school's Facebook page so that everybody who attended our school would see. Admittedly, I didn't really think this part through since I not only did this in full view of every other conscious person at the party, but I also knew that the photos wouldn't last long on the school site before they were taken down. But since it was a small school in a small town, I didn't doubt that a whole bunch of people would see it before a teacher removed the photos, and that's exactly what I wanted. Next came the recordings. When I got home, I got a verbal bludgeoning from my parents for sneaking out, but they stopped when I finally told them what had been happening. They were both shocked and a little disbelieving, but when I played them the recordings I'd saved on my phone, they were just as sickened as I was. I was silent in the car as my dad drove me to the police station, receiving a lecture about how I should have just come to him in the first place, and what I had done at the party was not necessary. But I felt like it was at the same time. My phone had already blown up, with the other students commenting on the pictures of my friends with written on their foreheads. And while a lot of them just laughed, many of them were questioning if there was any truth to it. And that is exactly what I wanted. I want everybody to know exactly who they are, so they have nowhere to hide. The hours at the police station were admittedly very scary. I was still debating to myself whether or not I did the right thing, but my quote best friends had chosen their fate. I felt hurt and betrayed that they had allowed themselves to become this way, and even though I felt a little guilt for potentially ruining their future, I did what I thought it had to be done. And long story short, the recordings were enough to get them all charged for planning to commit a crime. Since the girl that friend 1 had been planning on drugging had been named, her parents were understandably furious and demanded that all 3 of my ex-friends be arrested. I would have been too, were it not for the girl telling her parents and the courts that I had warned her to stay away from friend 1 and the party. I was charged for a use of an illegal substance since I did admit to using the pills of my 3 ex-friends, and also battery since the permanent marker had been seen as a form of assault, but luckily I never got any jail time over it. I did get a buttload of community service though. All 3 of them were tried as adults in the case, but only friend 1 actually got jail time since he was the only one who got in the pills, and he was the only one who wanted to use them. The other 2 only got probation and community service for being quote accessories, but they were completely shunned in our town. Nobody ever let them forget. I was prepared for the backlash, ready to be jumped by them or something, but strangely enough, I think seeing friend 1 go to jail for what he did knocked some sense into the 2 of them, and they wised up enough to actually go to college without any football scholarships since they both kicked off the team. They never came anywhere near me again, which surprised me, but I no longer cared. In my mind, my friends were dead to me long before all this went down, and by the time I moved away to college, it was all behind me. I'm in my final year of college now, and I think about those 3 sometimes. I think about how if my parents hadn't sent me to that special school, I might have ended up just like them. Oddly enough, I do miss them at times, but I know it's the memory of the kids I miss, not the men they turned into. I thank my parents continuously for sending me to that place, and even got some approval from Jay when I felt man enough to tell him what happened. I don't know what'll happen to friend 1 when he gets out of jail, but part of me hopes he learns his lesson and moves on with his life like I have. Jay called me a few days ago just to check up, and I told him the whole story, which is kind of why I'm telling the whole internet now. I guess the moral of the story is to stand up to your friends when you know they're doing something wrong, but maybe not in the stupid way that I did. Always involve others that are more qualified to deal with the situation than you are, even if you're a headstrong and stubborn teenager who thinks you know everything. OP, that story was insanity. However, I do have to say I do not condone any of the actions that you took as a stupid teenager, but I'm glad that you know those actions were not good in the first place. You even said it yourself that you should have just told the proper authorities. However, personally, I think what you did to these pieces of trash was awesome. They get exactly what they deserve. You drugged them just like they were gonna drug the girl, and instead of doing gross things to them, you just exposed them for who they truly are to everybody in your entire town. Awesome, OP. That was killer. Should you have done it? No, but it was awesome anyway. That was r/NuclearRevenge. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button to let us know what you think of the content, and subscribe to the channel for even more content every Monday and Friday. Thanks a lot. Peace.
Oh, hello. I didn't think anybody would want to hang out in the dark with me. You want to click on one of these videos?